The evening sky glowed with soft orange light as the city rushed into its busy night, and tall buildings sparkled like giant crystals against the fading sun. And inside one of those glowing buildings stood a famous restaurant known for its luxury and expensive meals. Yet on this particular night, something far more unexpected was waiting to happen inside those shining walls, and that moment would change two lives forever. Adrian Hawley stepped out of his black luxury car and walked toward the entrance of the restaurant with calm steps and a tired mind. And although he was a billionaire with everything a person could wish for, he still carried a quiet loneliness in his heart, because his life was filled with meetings, businesses, responsibilities, and people who only wanted something from him. And tonight he simply wanted a peaceful dinner and a few hours to breathe in silence. As he entered the restaurant, the warm lights and soft music welcomed him, but something else caught his attention, far stronger than the smell of expensive food or the elegant decorations, and it made him stop in the doorway, as if time itself had frozen around him. His eyes narrowed and he blinked slowly because he could not believe what he was seeing. Just a few feet away, Waitress, wearing a simple uniform, walked between the tables carrying a tray with careful hands, and though her steps were steady, her face looked tired and her eyes carried a weight that did not belong to someone so young. And then Adrian looked closer and his heart skipped a beat because he recognized her, or at least he thought he did, and the name on her small badge confirmed it completely. Her name was Maya Patel, the girl who once sat beside him in school, the girl who shared her lunch with him when he had nothing, the girl who made him laugh during days that felt impossible, the girl who dreamed of becoming an artist and painting the world in bright colors. He had not seen her since they graduated, and life pulled them in completely different directions. He became a billionaire. She became someone he never expected to see in this place, especially not like this. Adrian stood frozen as memories rushed back to him, the school hallways, the long talks, the promises she made about chasing her dreams, and the quiet kindness she always showed him when no one else cared. And now she was here working as a waitress, moving quickly from table to table, avoiding eye contact and forcing a tired smile. Even when rude customers snapped their fingers at her or spoke to her without respect, something did not match the girl he remembered, because Maya was always full of life, always confident, always shining like she carried her own little sun inside her heart. But the Maya standing in front of him now looked dimmed, as if life had taken away that bright light and replaced it with stress, fear, and exhaustion. And Adrian felt a deep ache inside his chest, a strange mix of sadness and confusion. He wanted to call her name, but the words stayed stuck in his throat because he was not ready for her reaction. Maybe she would reject him, maybe she would be embarrassed, maybe she would pretend not to know him, and that thought hit him harder than anything, because she was one of the few people from his past he truly cared about, and the idea of her struggling like this felt unbelievably wrong. Maya finally turned toward his table, and for a moment, their eyes met. Her steps slowed, and her expression changed as if she felt something familiar too, but she quickly looked away and walked toward him with a professional smile. The kind of smile that hides pain and hides stories no one wants to share. And when she reached his table, her voice was soft, polite, and distant as she asked a simple question that broke his heart more than she knew. "Welcome to Silver Garden. What can I get for you today?" Adrian stared at her, unable to speak for a moment, because the sound of her voice brought back memories. He forgot he even had memories of two friends laughing under a tree, memories of her handing him a drawing of them together, memories of her telling him that he should never give up because life always changes. He finally managed to answer, but his voice felt tight as he said he needed a moment to decide. As Maya walked away, Adrian watched her carefully. He noticed how she rubbed her hands together, as if they were sore, how she lowered her head when someone yelled at her, how she kept checking the time as if she was worried about being late for something else, and every detail told him one thing very clearly: she was struggling far more than she wanted anyone to know. And that thought filled him with a strong sense of worry and a sudden need to understand the truth. He knew he could not leave without talking to her. He knew something had happened, something big, Something painful, something that forced her to give up her dreams and work here in silence. And as he watched her walk through the restaurant, he silently promised himself that he was going to find out what happened to Maya, no matter what it took, because seeing her like this was not something he could ignore any longer, and this night was about to become much more than a quiet dinner. The soft lights in the restaurant flickered gently as Maya moved between the tables with her careful steps and tired hands, and Adrian watched her every movement with growing concern, because something inside him kept whispering that the girl he remembered had changed in ways he could not yet understand, and that feeling made his heart beat faster with worry and confusion as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Maya carried plates with quiet focus while hiding the exhaustion on her face, and even though she kept smiling at customers, her smile never reached her eyes, which looked dim and distant, as if she had learned to lock her real feelings behind a hidden curtain. And this made Adrian study her closely, because he remembered her as the girl who once painted bright pictures during school breaks and laughed freely without fear, and seeing her now struggling silently filled him with a sadness he could not push away. When Maya returned to his table, she kept her eyes low and asked if he was ready to order, but her voice carried a small shake that did not belong to someone confident or relaxed. Adrian sensed that something heavy rested on her shoulders, something she did not want anyone to see, and he answered her gently while watching her reaction, hoping she might recognize him or at least show a sign of their past friendship. But Maya simply nodded politely and stepped back, and for a moment Adrian wondered if she truly did not remember him, or if she was pretending not to remember because she did not want to face the past. And the more he thought about it, the more confused he became, because he knew no reason why she would avoid him unless something painful was hidden in her life. And that thought made him even more determined to talk to her before the night ended. As he looked around the restaurant, he noticed how the other employees moved quickly and nervously while keeping their eyes on the owner, who stood at the counter with a strict expression and crossed arms, and every time Maya or another waiter passed near him, he gave them cold, sharp looks that made them walk even faster, as if they feared upsetting him. And this small detail made Adrian feel uneasy, because no workplace should carry such fear and tension. A loud voice suddenly echoed across the room when a rude customer snapped his fingers at Maya, demanding water in a harsh tone, and Maya immediately hurried to him with an apologetic smile, even though she had done nothing wrong. And Adrian watched this scene with burning anger in his chest, because it reminded him of times in school when people treated him badly until Maya stood up for him, and he hated seeing her treated in the same way by strangers who knew nothing about her heart or her worth. As Maya poured the water, her hand trembled just slightly, and the customer complained again, saying she was too slow and too clumsy, and Adrian could see how she swallowed her emotions and apologized softly so she would not create trouble for herself. And this made him clench his fists under the table, because he could not understand why someone as gentle as Maya deserved such harshness, or why she had to fight alone without anyone supporting her. She hurried away from the table and passed by Adrian again, but this time he noticed something he had missed earlier: a small bandage on her left wrist, as if she had hurt herself recently, maybe from carrying too much or working too many hours. And the sight of that bandage cut into him like a silent warning that her life was not just tiring but possibly painful, and this deepened the storm growing in his heart. When she reached the back of the restaurant, she leaned against the wall for a second and closed her eyes as if she needed to gather strength before continuing. And even though she tried to hide it, Adrian saw everything: her fear, her exhaustion, her attempts to stay calm, her effort to smile even when she wanted to cry. And he knew these signs too well, because he had faced them long ago when he had nothing, and Maya was the only person who helped him rise again. Took a deep breath and made a decision he would not leave without speaking to her properly. He needed to know what happened to her, what forced her to live this way, what took away her dreams, and why she felt the need to hide her real emotions behind a mask of politeness and silence. And even though he did not know how she would react, he was ready To face anything because he could not forget the past they shared, he pushed his chair back and stood up slowly watching Maya as she carried another tray toward the kitchen, and as she disappeared behind the tall silver door, he followed with careful steps, hoping he could talk to her away from the customers and away from the judging eyes of the strict owner, and his heart raced with a mix of fear and hope, because he knew the moment he spoke to her, life might change for both of them in unexpected ways. Kitchen door swung open with a soft creak as Maya stepped inside, carrying a tray of empty glasses, and she breathed out slowly, as if the air outside had been heavy, and she needed a moment to rest her tired spirit and her weary hands, and she pressed her back against the wall, hoping for just a few seconds of calm before returning to the loud restaurant. Again, Adrian pushed the door open a few moments later and stepped inside quietly, and the warm kitchen lights cast a soft glow over the metal counters and cooking pots, and as he entered, Maya lifted her head in surprise because she did not expect anyone to follow her, especially not the stranger who kept watching her with careful eyes during the evening, and for a moment, she looked nervous as if she feared she had done something wrong. Adrian raised his hand slightly in a gentle gesture to show he meant no harm, and he spoke her name softly, hoping it would remind her of the old days they once shared. And Maya froze when she heard it, because his voice carried a familiar warmth she had not heard in many years, and her eyes widened slowly as she truly looked at him for the first time that night, and recognition spread across her tired face. "Adrian Hawley," she whispered in a shaky voice, unable to hide her shock, and she stared at him as if she was seeing a ghost from her past one she never expected to meet again, and her hands trembled as she placed the tray on the counter, because a swirl of emotions rushed through her: surprise, confusion, fear, and something else she could not quite describe, yet maybe hope or maybe worry about what this sudden meeting would bring into her already difficult life. Adrian stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance, and asked gently why she was here working such long hours, and why she looked so worn, as if life had been unkind to her. And Maya glanced away as if searching for strength to answer, but she found only silence inside herself, because she had buried her struggles deep, where no one could find them, and she was not ready to uncover them all at once. She tried to smile and told him she was fine and everything was normal, but her voice cracked slightly, giving away the truth she wished to hide, and Adrian did not believe her empty words, because he could see the pain behind her eyes and the exhaustion on her face, and the way she held her hands close, as if trying to protect her fragile heart from breaking again. He asked her again with gentle insistence why she worked here and why she seemed afraid of speaking up, and Maya lowered her gaze like a child caught hiding a secret she wanted to escape from, and for a long moment she said nothing, and the quiet air between them felt heavy with all the unspoken things she carried inside her soul. Finally she took a deep breath and told him she never planned this life. She once had dreams, she once had hope, she once believed she could become something more, but life changed without warning, and everything she wanted slowly slipped away like sand through her fingers, and she had to start working anywhere she could to survive and support the people she loved. Adrian listened quietly, feeling a deep ache grow inside his chest, because this was not the Maya he remembered. This was not the girl who laughed loudly and shared her dreams so fearlessly, and he wanted to help her, but he also wanted to understand what exactly broke her spirit so completely that she ended up here, hiding her pain behind polite smiles and trembling hands. Before she could continue, the kitchen door swung open again, and the restaurant owner stepped inside with a cold, harsh expression, and his eyes locked onto Maya with irritation, as if she had done something terribly wrong by stopping for even a moment, and he barked at her, demanding she return to work and move faster, because customers were waiting, and he warned her that any delay would be taken out of her salary, and his voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. Maya flinched visibly and quickly nodded her head, and the fear in her eyes told Adrian everything he needed to know about the kind of treatment she faced every day, and the anger in his chest burned stronger than before, because he could not stand the thought of anyone speaking to her That way, especially after knowing everything she sacrificed for her family and her future. When the owner finally left, Maya looked at Adrian with a mixture of embarrassment and sadness because she did not want him to see her life like this. She did not want him to witness her being scolded like a child or treated like she had no value, and she whispered softly that he should leave before things got worse for her because she could not risk losing her job, not when so much depended on her. Adrian stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and promised her quietly that he would not walk away, that he would not let her suffer alone, that he would find out everything and help her no matter what it took, because she once helped him in ways she never knew, and now it was his turn to stand. Beside her, Maya stood in the warm kitchen light with her hands slightly shaking and her breath uneven because Adrian's promise kept echoing in her mind like a soft voice that carried both comfort and fear, and she did not know whether to trust the hope that awakened inside her or to push it away before it grew too strong and hurt her again, like so many hopes in her past. Adrian watched her carefully, noticing every small tremble in her fingers, every tight breath, every glance filled with worry, and he knew she was hiding something far deeper than she had admitted in the kitchen, and he felt a heavy pull inside his chest, urging him to understand her situation fully, because the pain in her eyes was not something he could ignore anymore. No matter how carefully she tried to hide it, when Maya stepped back into the main hall, the light seemed brighter and the noise louder, and every customer voice sounded sharper against her ears, and she wished she could disappear into a quiet corner where no one would demand anything from her. But instead she forced her tired smile once again and walked toward a table with 2 customers waiting impatiently for service. Adrian followed her into the hall, staying close enough to watch but far enough not to cause trouble, and as he observed her, he saw how she almost stumbled when a customer pushed his chair back too quickly, and how she quickly apologized even though she was not at fault, and this small moment made his heart clench because she looked like someone who had learned to carry blame even when she did nothing wrong. Owner stood near the counter with crossed arms and cold eyes, and every few seconds he glared at Maya, as if he was waiting for her to make a mistake so he could punish her again. And Adrian noticed how Maya flinched every time she walked past him, like she expected some harsh remark or a threat to fall on her shoulders, and this made Adrian feel a growing fire of anger spreading through his chest, because he refused to let her suffer one more day under such cruelty. When the dinner rush began, customers filled the restaurant, and Maya rushed from table to table, moving so fast her breaths became short and shallow, and at one point when she reached a table holding several dirty plates, another waiter accidentally bumped into her, causing a glass to slip from her tray and fall onto the floor with a loud crash, sending tiny shards of glass across the tiles. For a moment the whole restaurant went silent, and Maya froze like a fragile figure caught in the center of a storm, and her lips parted in fear because she knew exactly what was coming next. And Adrian watched helplessly as the owner marched toward her with heavy footsteps that shook the air like thunder, and his voice exploded through the hall as he yelled at her for being careless, slow, useless, and irresponsible. Maya lowered her head and whispered apologies again and again, but her voice barely came out because she was fighting tears, and Adrian felt something inside him break at the sight of her trembling under the cruel words of a man who treated her like she was worth nothing, and he stepped forward ready to stop the shouting, but Maya quickly shook her head, begging him with her eyes not to interfere, and her silent plea held so much fear that Adrian froze in place, unable to move. Owner finished his harsh lecture and ordered her to clean the mess immediately, and then cut half of her pay for the night as punishment, and Maya knelt on the floor, picking up the tiny glass pieces with careful shaking hands, trying not to cry as customers watched in uncomfortable silence, and Adrian watched too, feeling helpless fury growing inside him until he could barely contain it. When Maya finally stood again, she hurried away into the back hallway, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her uniform, and Adrian followed her quietly with slow, steady steps, and when he found her leaning against the wall, she was breathing heavily like someone who had been running for a long time, with no place to rest, and he could see the tears she tried to hide, but could not stop. He stepped closer and asked her softly why she allowed herself to be treated so badly, and why she allowed fear to control her life, and Maya hesitated for a long moment, before answering with a weak, trembling voice, because she knew she could not hide the truth any longer, not from him and not from herself. She told him the owner held her job over her head like a chain because he knew she desperately needed every bit of money she could earn, and he threatened to fire her anytime she made even a tiny mistake. And she explained how she worked double shifts to pay rent, how she sent money to take care of her sick mother, how she covered school expenses for her younger brother, and how she had no one else to rely on, no one except herself. And then with a broken whisper, she revealed the final truth, the truth she kept buried deeper than all the others. The owner had taken her ID documents when she first joined, claiming he needed them for official records, and he refused to give them back no matter how many times she asked, and without those papers, she could not apply for better work or leave the job because she feared getting into trouble with the law. Adrian felt a wave of shock and rage rush through his entire body, because this was not just cruelty, this was control and manipulation, and he knew instantly that Maya was trapped in a situation far worse than he imagined, and at that moment he made a silent promise to himself, a promise that nothing would stop him from freeing her from this nightmare and making sure she never lived in fear again. The night air outside the restaurant felt colder than before, as Adrian stepped out for a moment to breathe and gather his thoughts, because everything Maya had confessed was shaking him from the inside, and he knew he could not waste another second if he wanted to help her escape the fear she lived with every single day. And he felt something rising inside him, a mix of determination, anger, and a deep protective instinct he had not felt in years. The memory of Maya kneeling on the floor, picking up pieces of broken glass with trembling hands, played again and again in his mind, and each time it made his chest tighten because he could still hear the cruel voice of the owner echoing through the restaurant, and the image of Maya trying not to cry burned like fire in his heart. And he knew he could not let her return to that situation tomorrow or ever again. Adrian pulled out his phone and called his personal assistant, a man named Lewis, who had worked with him for years and trusted him completely, and in a low, firm voice, he asked Lewis to investigate the restaurant, the owner, and every document connected to the place, because he suspected something illegal was happening behind the scenes, and he needed proof as soon as possible. And Lewis immediately agreed, sensing the seriousness in Adrian's tone. After ending the call, Adrian stood still for a moment under the glow of the streetlight, and he looked back at the restaurant windows where he could see Maya moving between the tables with quiet, tired steps as if nothing had happened, and the sight of her pretending to be strong when she was close to breaking filled him with even stronger determination to act quickly and protect her from everything she was afraid of. He returned inside and sat at his table while watching Maya from a distance, because he did not want to bring her more trouble by speaking to her openly, and he waited patiently for the right moment. When the dinner rush slowed down and the noise softened, and he noticed how she kept touching her wrist where the bandage sat as if it hurt or reminded her of something painful, and he wished he could ask her about it, but he knew she was not ready to share everything. Yet an hour passed, and the restaurant finally grew quieter, and some customers began leaving, and the staff moved slower with relieved breaths, and the owner stepped into his office, slamming the door behind him without noticing Adrian's sharp gaze following his shadow. And Adrian used this moment to stand up and approach the hallway, where Maya was setting down a tray of empty cups with tired arms. When she saw him, she looked worried, as if she feared he would bring trouble. But before she could speak, he smiled gently and told her that he was not here to cause problems, and that he only wanted to talk for a moment away from the eyes of the owner. And Maya nodded slowly, though her eyes still showed a hint of fear, because she knew any time someone spoke to her, the owner found a way to punish her later. Adrian guided her to the back corner near the storage room where the lights were dim and the quiet hummed like a soft blanket. And once they were alone, he told her in a firm, calm voice that she did not deserve the way she was being treated and that everything happening to her was wrong, and that she should not be afraid because he would help her get out of this place, no matter what it took. And Maya stared at him with wide eyes filled with confusion and disbelief, because she was not used to anyone protecting her. Anymore, she whispered that she could not leave the job without her documents, and even if she left, she would have nowhere to go and no money to survive the next month. And she explained that the owner kept her trapped with fear and threats, and she had no power to fight him. And hearing this made Adrian feel like a storm was building inside him, ready to destroy anything that hurt her. Adrian leaned closer and told her that she was not alone, and she would never be alone again, because he would not let her suffer one more night in fear. And he told her he was already taking steps to expose the owner and his illegal actions, and that very soon everything would change. And Maya looked at him with trembling lips as if her heart wanted to believe him, but her fear was still stronger than her hope. Then the kitchen door opened, and another waiter whispered to Maya that the owner was calling her to his office immediately. And Maya turned pale because she knew what that meant, and she looked at Adrian with fear filling her eyes, and she whispered that she had to go or things would get worse. And Adrian stepped forward ready to intervene, but she shook her head, begging him softly not to make a scene because the owner would hurt her even more if he did. She took a shaky breath and walked toward the office door with small, frightened steps, and Adrian watched her disappear behind it, and he knew something dark was waiting for her inside, and he felt anger rise in his chest like thunder preparing to strike, because he refused to let Maya suffer another second under that cruel man. And he silently promised himself that tonight everything would begin to change, and soon the owner would face a truth he would never expect.